Hey there everybody, it's Mark Crowley. I'm back with another How to Draw video. You know, almost from the beginning of my career, I have been known for doing these hyper-detailed cityscape illustrations like this one from Brody's Ghost Book 1. Here's an even more extreme example from Brody's Ghost Book 2, just kind of crawling with detail. And people have requested over the years, can you do a video showing how to create such an illustration? So that's what I'm going to be doing today. I've taken the sort of basic line work that comes from a previous video of mine on one-point perspective. I'll put a little link here if you want to go back and watch that video. But I have to warn you, this is going to be one of my more advanced lessons. There is time-lapse ahead. Brace yourselves. But that's the only way to cover this sort of hours-long process. It's 10 a.m. as I begin working on this. I'm going to do most of it in time-lapse, but I'm going to come back periodically to sort of explain the various choices that I've made. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so the first thing I'm doing here is taking these fairly simple support structures for this overpass and trying to make them a little more visually interesting. And that meant, as you saw, sort of getting a slightly diagonal base in here and sort of adding these support structures here. Of course, having done that here, it means I'm going to have to do it again and again for the other ones. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so just a quick word of explanation here that when you're doing something like this and you design a structure that repeats going back, you do have to make sure that all of these lines are receding toward that one point, right? If you understand one-point perspective. And so that's just a little tip. And all of these bottom lines will, line up with one another. The lines will line up. Whoa, how clever of me. And that's just a little tip if you're trying to do something. Yes, is it time-consuming? Absolutely. But that's part of the trick of doing these hyper-detailed things. You just have to be patient. And I'll do this in real time. I've decided to add, just for whatever reason, an extra line on the bottom of these little structures, right? And so anytime you would do something like that, you have to make sure that it keeps agreeing with the one-point perspective that you had from the start. So let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. I'm going to add over here an extra structure that, the whole thing is about just adding detail, more things to take this rather simple thing and make it more complex. Okay, so my idea here was to add a sort of broken off supporting beam structure of some kind. This is supposed to be a sort of dystopian future, so we need parts of this to look demolished and broken down. But again, you can see that all of these lines on the side are responding to that one-point perspective. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of more structures, something down here, maybe something in the foreground here, and then again come back to give you some explanation or maybe talk a little bit about why I'm placing these things where I'm placing them. Okay, so what I want to talk about is not so much how I did this, but why did I put something here and then put something here? I think really when you're doing an illustration like this, you're trying to achieve some sort of interesting balance, right? So we have visually, this calls a lot of attention to itself, this structure here, so I put something way over here to kind of balance that out. And then this also is maybe, creating 3 points of interest there, but one of the main reasons I put this here is to get something into the extreme foreground to add a sense of depth. So I want to have at least one object that's kind of cut off by the lower part, and we feel that it's a lot closer than everything else in the illustration. Now, I'm going to go ahead and start working on adding a very distant, broken up piece of highway overpass over here. Okay, so a couple of things here. The reasoning for putting in this sort of broken up underpass is kind of similar. It's to get another thing that's at a different layer of distance, I suppose. This one's going to be, you know, when I finally get to the finished illustration, it'll appear quite far away. And then while I was at it, I thought I'd put into this additional structure. Looks like some kind of pipeline or something going through there. A lot of these things, I don't know if there's a huge, you know, if I'm thinking about it the way an architect would, a lot of these things are just sort of artistic instinct things, right? So like right now I'm going to add a similar looking line of, you know, electrical pipe or whatever it's going to be up here, and that just gives you an idea of how, so a lot of times you're just sort of playing around and, you know, let's add a little more detail here, add a little more detail there. One thing I'm going to do now is to add something that's moving across the middle, and that is going to be these sort of electrical towers that have lines, electrical power lines between them. So I'll do one of those here, and then I'm going to think I'll put another one over here closer to the foreground. Okay, so just to sort of explain again, why did I do that? I think we have a lot of motion, I think visual motion from the foreground to the background with all of these lines, and I just wanted something to contrast that with a sort of left to right motion here. And then again, you know, anytime you can get something a little closer to the foreground, it helps to add to the depth. And, you know, repeating things, right? So I got the lines here and you have the lines there, that kind of stuff. It just sort of ties the picture together. Let me move on now to what I would call the secondary details. These are, you know, I've added a lot of structural stuff. Now I'm going to add sort of smaller things, you know, like oil barrels and different things like that. I thought I might add a Chinese character up here, just to spice things up a little bit. And, yeah, I'll come back and talk a little more after that. All right, well, it is a little after 11, coming up on a quarter after 11. So it's been about an hour and 15 minutes as I've added all this pencil to bring me really now to the point where I think I can start inking it. Just a quick word about some of the choices I made. I decided to take these buildings, these distant buildings, and enlarge them a little bit. Why? Why did I do that? Just a matter of balance. You know, I think in the earlier illustration was a pretty blank illustration, and those things were holding their own against the rest of the picture. Now, with all this other added detail here, I felt like I had to sort of give that a little more substance to help it compete. And now I think we are ready to move on to the inking. I'm going to do this pretty much all in time-lapse, but maybe toward the end I can come back and talk a little bit about some of my inking techniques. All right, well, I don't know if I would say that I'm completely done with this inking at this stage, but I've got most of the main stuff down where I want it to be. And just to say a word or two about my inking approach, I use the ruler a lot. Anytime you see a perfectly straight line that was achieved by way of a ruler, you know, in my opinion, nothing wrong with that, especially when you're doing sort of architectural stuff like this. Other things, you know, that are these sort of like decaying marks that I'm making right now, that's all I'm just doing by hand, and even there's no pencil lines underneath it. I'm kind of improvising almost. So, and you'll notice certain things have been altered from that original pencil stage that I'd started out with. But what I want to do now, I'm going to clean this up first of all. I'm going to erase a lot of the pencil lines. Then I'm going to go in with a kind of pale marker, I think, to get started, just to identify for myself where the shading is going to begin. Alright, well, I'm done with the marker. That was a Prismacolor marker, by the way. And I'm switching to watercolor now, which is in many ways my preferred technique. I do like to work with watercolors. You have a sort of infinite number of colors, and it's relatively inexpensive. I mean, if you go in and you want to buy a set of markers that has all these different colors, you will be shocked at how expensive they actually are. Whereas with the tube of watercolors, you know, you get 5 or 6 different colors, maybe 7 or 8 at most. Mixing them together, you can produce almost all the different shades that you want. Maybe I can do a separate video on watercolor mixing and so forth at some stage. But I'm going to go ahead and go back to time-lapse to show you how I add further color to all of this with the watercolor. Alright, so I'm going in now. I thought I would talk a little bit about the watercoloring, although that's not going to be the focus of this video. I think we're really, this is really all about the initial stuff of building the structures and adding the details and so forth. But I thought I'd talk a little bit about how I'm keeping this very monochromatic for the most part and adding just a little touch of red here on the Chinese character, and may try to pick that up throughout the illustration, just a few little drops of red here and there. This kind of limited color scheme always appeals to me much more than a kind of rainbow-colored, super bright, especially for this kind of thing, this desolate, futuristic landscape. Keeping it almost monochromatic, I think, helps. But what I'm going to do, maybe, I'm going to try to mix up a special color of paint that's for the sky. And that'll be one of the last things I do before, maybe just adding final touches and bringing it to a close. Alright, so I'm going to switch to gouache now, and I've taken these two different shades, one called Blue Lake and the other is just white, mixing lots of white and just a touch of the blue to create the color of the sky. Now, the reason that I've chosen to do this in gouache is because gouache is opaque. And as such, I can kind of create a pretty even color of blue here, and I don't have to worry too much about streaking and so forth. So again, as you often see in my full color videos, I love to do mixed media. Certain media allow me to do certain things, and when it comes to doing the sky, I will very often switch to a gouache like this. Well, let's go ahead and finish this up. Alright, well, you can see an awful lot of it was done in the sort of final touches stage, and I'm going to have to come up with a way of doing a video that focuses exclusively on that. It is about 5 hours altogether that I put into this illustration to get to this stage, for those of you who are curious. But for now, let me go ahead and thank anyone who has supported me by getting my books. We've got Brody's Ghost, we've got Miki Falls, and we've got Mastering Manga, my How to Draw book. I greatly appreciate anyone who helps me out by ordering any of those books, or just by subscribing, by watching the videos, by leaving comments, all that good stuff. But let's go ahead and lay down the brush. I want to thank everyone who's watched this video. I hope you found it useful, and I'll be back with another one real soon.